Yo, what it is, YouTube? It's your boy Nitsa coming back with another bullseye of a tutorial here today on the channel. I wanted to give a couple of tips about the 1176, a couple of different ways that I like to use it, and give just a brief overview about how this is a very powerful, tone machine for rapping, and that can help, bring a lot of impact, a lot of excitement to, rap vocals. And when's the proper way to deploy 1176? So right here, I have the both the Waves version of the 1176 and also the UAD version. Something I like a lot about the UAD version is that, the same founder of Universal Audio, which is Bill Putnam, is actually the person who actually made the 1176, right? So the 1176 is a FET compressor, right? Known for being very aggressive, very colored, and it also is known for being very quick. And, with the attack and the release times, they are very important to the overall composition of how this compressor can sound very good on any source material put it through, right? So with these revisions, we have a couple of advantages right here. They're all different, right, in the way they have a different kind of harmonic characteristics, in the way they saturate and the way they break up. So with the very first ones I want to go over today is the basic 1176 legacy versions, right? That if you do have an Apollo twin or maybe a solo, you can use those versions, right? Now these versions are pretty good because they actually are very low on DSP. They're pretty economical. They're not too taxing. But with these ones right here, they don't model the actual input and the output stage of the 76. You only get the compressor action. So that can be very advantageous if, let's say, you're in the tracking phase and you're just recording and you're just trying to use this as like a utility compressor, right? Just necessarily not trying to commit to a sound yet, but you're just recording and you want a little bit of FET compression. I definitely love going with the 1176 SE on some of my songs, just because, once you start putting it on track after track, I like to use it on the lead vocals, the background vocals. It starts to it just is very clean, versus where if you use some of the 1176s, some of that saturation, that grit, that distortion can start to add up in a very way that's going to give you a specific sound that might not necessarily be appropriate for the music that you're working on. So that's the thing that you have to be delicate with in regards to 1176, is like, is this compressor being appropriate, the way this compressor is moving and the saturation from the input and output, is it appropriate for this type of song that I'm working on? Sometimes you don't need that gritty coloredness, right, when you're doing rap music, because it might be a smooth song, so you might want something a little bit more subtle, something like the SE, or just something that's a little bit more cleaner, right? I generally love to use this on parallel as well. But let's talk about the attack and the release times, right? A great advantage that the newer, the Spark versions and the newer updated 76s have is a mix knob. And recently the Waves 76 had just integrated the mix knob, right? So when it comes to the attack and release times, let's talk about this. I see this in a way where it's about opening and closing the song, right? The way you handle that initial transient, the 76 works in a beautiful way where it will, rapidly attack that initial transient, but as it's going through the rest of the peaks, it kind of slows down a little bit. So it's very musical in that way, like that, right? And we also have to think about with the 1176 is just the way that people talk in real life. So the attack and the release, usually with the way that people talk when they're happy or they're feeling kind of good, they kind of have a longer release time, right? And a little bit more comes through. But usually when people are mad, they will talk a little bit more aggressively with shorter sustain. So that's just how I see the 1176, like my little example. But that for sure in real life, that when people do speak like that, right? When they're kind of aggressive or they're angry, right? They kind of have a more abrupt transient to them, right? And a shorter release. So that's just the way that I see the 1176 is, how can I make the music talk to me? You can use the 1176 to make something sound a little bit more aggressive than what it really was, right? And using the all buttons in ratio, you can enhance the nuances. So that all buttons in ratio is a ratio coming from the hardware, right? A trick coming from the hardware that is literally somewhere, 40, maybe maybe 50 years old, you know, depending on when it first came out. I believe is the 70s, right? And people still to this day are using that all buttons in ratio. And let's talk about why is that important. The all buttons in ratio is very important, right? Because of the way it just limits the entire sounds. It kind of boosts up like the way the limiter works, right? It has a very high ratio. Each one of these ratios has a different tone to it, right? When you're going back to back on those ratios, right? It's actually just kind of like, you know, changing the way the music speaks, right? The articulation of the vocal, right? But when you put it on the all buttons in ratio, it kind of does this hyper compression sound that boosts up all the nuances. And that's why people like to use it in parallel, because you can use the, you know, some of those nuances to enhance the in your faceness of the vocal, right? Because that's what the human ear uses to determine distance. You know, the nuances, you know, the way somebody's talking and the way they're smacking their lips and the way their breaths are coming through can be enhanced by the 1176, and the release time can create the breathing. You know, when somebody's talking to you in real life, you can kind of hear their breaths too. So that all plays into the proximity effect, right? But with the attack, right, it also has the effect of the transient. How do you shape the transient? With a slower attack, you can make the vocal come in your face. Pay attention to this preset, in your face vocal, right? A slower attack, right, is right here. So it kind of works kind of like reverse, right? This is a slower, would be slower, and as you increase this would be faster. Same thing goes for the release, right? But with the slower attack, it lets more of the transient come through, so you perceive it as in your face, versus when you use more of the, you know, attack, right? You're taking out more of the punch, you're dropping down more of that initial transient, it will sound farther away. So your human ear uses the nuances as well as the transient to determine distance, you know? So that's why 1176 is an incredible way to do that. Now let's play the source material that I have right here, and let's get to listening to some music and how we can use it to juice up.
The only thing I see is the moon. I'm in shackles, why these crackers got me locked in a cage. My niggas won't pick up the phone, I started feeling a little rage. Me and Kari whipping bricks, we tryna get that shit right. I don't know if you been fucking when I left you in tight. Brother told me we ain't tell them bitches fucking on Jody. I be writing all these lyrics on the crack when the water. I'm too real for everybody, I be saving my energy. Why you block the number? No, you hear it be saying me. Had to open up my eyes and see that nigga be creep. It be hard to stay awake, but it be harder to sleep. You ain't send no money in and ask if I needed it. Love it just another word, cause I know you don't be meaning it. Love it be meaningless, love it for real. I got tired of hearing lies and telling you how I feel. I'ma do this.
So that's one of my artists that I work with, J Mac. I'll drop the link down below. So let's pay attention to this waveform. Like I always say, you got to make observations to how your waveform is looking before you hit 1176. In a situation like this, you know, generally I did not record with the optical compressor. I usually do, right? And that's why I'm picking this one, right? Because this is very relevant, right? I feel like just because when you're singing a little bit, you can kind of get away with the effect compression in the very beginning of your vocal stages. I feel like, you know, some people try to, you know, come in and try to say, oh yeah, they like the track with 1176, which is nothing wrong with that. But I feel like with the rap vocal, you know, when people are coming in like that flow, I'm not gonna lie, if you put the 1176 very early on, it's gonna make the needle move all around because the compressor is already very aggressive. So when you got an aggressive signal going through, it's gonna be literally uncontrollable. Right. So prior to hitting 1176, I would suggest that you at least try to see how, you know, you're going to get control of your signal. Right. I would use like an optical compressor, like a 3A, you know, if you don't have an Apollo Twin, you can just pull it up right here. Right. And the audio suite, you know, just pull up like your optical compressor and print that down so it's a little bit more manageable. But I actually used a C4 and I was very aggressive, and pay attention to, you know, I had it on Electro, which is kind of like an 1176, but in a multi-band fashion, right, with the C4. That's a little bit of game right there. But you could also use a 1176 in a multi-band fashion using the studio rack chain, you know, so another gem right here, you know, you would just put it, set your crossovers, and yeah, you would have an 1176 in multi-band you know, which is kind of amazing when you think about that. You can get aggressive on certain parts. Maybe you just want to get aggressive on the lows, or maybe you want to get aggressive on the tops, and that's it, and just have the rest of your signal sounding good. But also with the 1176 of the UAD version, right, we have this kind of like this little function right here, which is kind of like a sidechain filter, right? So when you click this little scratch right here, it will kind of like push the release in like that. You see how I got pushed in? And you know, it will kind of give like a kind of like a little filter that will trigger less of the lows, right? So generally the 1176, you know, most of the energy for a vocal is in the lows. So you know, I personally don't like to use that, just because I like to give my compressor something to do. So I do want a lot of that energy to be compressed, you know, because I want it to pump a little bit. So that's a, you know, a little thing you can think about as well. So with the 1176s of the UAD Spark, right, you got to understand that you can use these as a saturator as well. You know, you can just click right here, turn off the Waves CLA 76 on the right hand side. Also has this option where you can just simply turn it off, right? You can just turn off the actual compressor action and just use this as a saturator, because, you know, the 1176s are known for being very colored with their solid state components, their input and output. A beautiful thing about this as well is that you can just use it to push it, to get all that distortion, that cream, that drive, you know, that color, without using boosting EQ. Many times I can find myself using the UAD Spark plugins not as just a you know, a compressor, you know, for what the actual utility is, but actually using it as just a color box, you know, just making the music sound a lot brighter, a lot more distorted, without getting that you know, compression artifacts, or using just a boosting EQ in general. So that's why I always try to tell you guys, you know, if you use the boosting EQ, you would actually be adding more of, you know, you'd be changing the frequency balance. But if you use 1176, you turn it off and you just let the signal run through it, but you crank up a little bit input gain, you're gonna get that color. You're gonna get some of that brightness that you already want without changing the frequency balance, because you're doing it through the use of the components. That's why it's very important to always know about the components. So after that, let's look at the AE, which is a very special one to me as well. I use that a lot. And with the AE, I find myself using it a lot for the vocals, just due to the overall settings that we have, right? So we have the ratio, which is the 2-to-1, right? Which means the knee becomes very soft. When you've got something like the all buttons in mode, it will make it become very hyperactive, and it would just kind of like be like a, you know, like a chef with a sushi chef with a knife, chop. It would just chop it, chop it, chop it, you know, just very abruptly. And that has a very nice sound to it, you know, pumping. That's why I like to use it in parallel, because it gives a little contrast. You can have a little swag on the top, but a little bit of pumping in the background, right? So the AE version is very good because it has that, you know, that 2-to-1 ratio, which makes the knee very soft, right? Which we always talk about, right? The knee is very important in regards to the attack and the release, because that's just kind of how the way the compressor will be speaking to you. It's going to be speaking very softly, but it will have a little bite to it as well, just due to the overall components. Then after that, you know, we have slow, right? The slow attack, which brings the attack time down to 10 milliseconds, right? So something that's very, very, very slow, and it helps that initial transient come through, which makes the sound very open. So you can use the AE strategically to still get that aggressive, you know, compression sound, but not too much on the top of the transient, so it's not gonna make the song sound very closed. And lastly, we have the Rev E, which is the model, the same one to the LN, right? So, you know, these revisions all came at different points. I believe this was the very first one, Rev A. This was the second one, and this was the last one right here. And also with these two buttons, the +8 and the +4, you know, that's kind of going to give you like, what is my output, right? So it will tell you like how loud you're hitting it and everything like that. And let's go ahead and look at the headroom as well. You know, you can chop down the headroom just in case if you have the input and the output kind of sounding like where you want it to be harmonic wise, but you want the compressor to act a little bit different, you can play with the headroom, right? So that's a very beautiful thing about 1176. This one, in my opinion, is the brightest one just due to the circuitry of it.
Crackers got me locked in the cage. My niggas won't pick up the phone. I started feeling a little rage. Me and Kari whipping bricks, we tryna get that shit right. I don't know if you been fucking when I left you with tight. Brother told me we ain't tell them bitches fucking.
That's the beautiful thing about Studio Rack. Like I can literally just, you know, play between this input and this output, right? So the gain staging will affect, the overall sound you get. Like prior to you even, playing around with the input and output, this input trim right here is a powerful tool on many plugins because you can change the tone, right? So let's just get right with this right here. And this is a singing song, so I want it to be open. So I would go with like a slower release, but usually you can go with a faster release too if you want to push the lead vocal back. Like if it's a dense rap mix, you might want to push it back a little bit, right? So let's listen to it.
Crackers got me locked in the cage. My niggas won't pick up the phone. I started feeling little rage. Me and Kari whipping bricks, we tryna get that shit right. I don't know if you been fucking when I left you in tight. Brother told me we ain't tell them bitches fucking on Jody. I be writing all these lyrics on the crack with the water. I'm too rich, my niggas won't pick up the phone. I started feeling little rage. Me and Kari whipping bricks, we tryna get that shit right. I don't know if you been fucking when I left you in tight. Brother told me we ain't tell them bitches fucking on Jody. I be writing all these lyrics on the crack with.
So you can hear when I roll through the ratio, it kind of like just changes the distance, the way the, this the way the compression handles that initial transient. I feel like when I'm going up on a higher ratio, it's kind of make it sounding a little bit more condensed, because the compression is getting more and more aggressive, right? But usually on a song like this, I probably use the 8-to-1. I love how an 8-to-1 sounds like on the Rev A, and you hear it's definitely giving us some more brightness. Pay attention, I've got it on off, and listen to how it just adds some brightness to the vocal.
I'm in shackles, why these crackers got me locked in the cage. My niggas won't pick up the phone, I started feeling little rage. Me and Kari whipping bricks, we tryna get that shit right. I don't know if you been fucking when I left you in tight. Brother told me we ain't tell them bitches fucking on. I'm in shackles, why these crackers got me locked in the cage. My niggas won't pick up the phone, I started feeling little rage. Me and Kari whipping bricks, we tryna get that shit right. I don't know if you been fucking when I left you in tight.
So you definitely hear that, there was a slight level boost, but I went ahead and fixed it towards the end. But you just hear the brightness. Like, it's very obvious that it added some brightness. All right, so I like to deploy the 1176 throughout my vocal recordings. In the beginning, the lead vocal, I generally use a slow attack to let that transient come through. But through the background vocals and my ad-libs, I start to speed up the attack, right? And that's because, like, I'm setting my sound stage using the transients, right? I'm taking out more punch out of my background vocals because I want them to be that. I want them to be background vocals. So that's why 1176 is an incredible tool to shaping the actual like stereo imaging of your actual song, the way you're pushing things in the back and making them sound up front with the compression, and the way you're kind of giving it some groove and some vibe, right? So that's pretty much all I have to say today. I didn't want to make this video too long, just wanted to give a brief overview. Just want to say thanks a lot for being a great part of my YouTube family. I do appreciate you guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
I'm coming real soon. Staring out the window, only thing I see is the moon. I'm in shackles, why these crackers got me locked in the cage. My niggas won't pick up the phone, I started feeling little rage. Me and Kari whipping bricks, we tryna get that shit right. I don't know if you been fucking when I left you in tight. Brother told me we ain't tell them bitches fucking on Jody. I be writing all these lyrics on the crack with the water. I'm too real for everybody, I be saving my energy. Why you block the number? No, you hear it be saying me. Had to open up my eyes and see that nigga be creep. It be hard to stay awake, but it be harder to sleep. Ain't seen no money in it and ask if I needed it. Love it just another word, cause I know you don't be meaning it. Love it be meaningless, love it for real. I got tired of hearing lies and telling you how I feel. I'ma do this and I'ma do that.